Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was a sunny morning and the house was full of life. The kids were romping around the kitchen, getting ready for school, while I stood at the stove, scrambling eggs and bacon for breakfast. The sunlight cast dappled light through the gaps in the curtains. Life was calm and orderly, and as usual, I was immersed in the minutiae of the day, as if everything was moving on a set trajectory. However, the sudden ringing of the phone shattered this tranquility. That sudden sound with a certain unspeakable tension. I put down my spatula and turned to my cell phone on the dining room table. The screen showed an unfamiliar number with a prefix I wasn't familiar with, which made me a little puzzled. Who usually calls me at this time of the morning? John, quick. My wallet's been stolen. On the other end of the line was the anxious voice of my wife, Alice. Alice was traveling out of town on business, and the anxiety in her voice made me immediately feel her sense of urgency. What did you say? The wallet was stolen? I asked hurriedly, suddenly a little nervous inside. Where are you? At the hotel. I left my wallet on the counter in the hotel lobby last night, and it was gone when I came back. The credit cards were all in there too, and you need to cancel all of them for me right now. She spoke sharply, almost as if she was ordering me. I immediately got into action and called my bank to cancel my credit card, as she requested, with some confusion in my mind, but didn't think much of it at the time. Alice had always been a cautious person and rarely made any mistakes when traveling, let alone something like losing her wallet. But she's so flustered right now, I can't be bothered to ask. A few minutes later, I finished canceling my credit card and breathed a sigh of relief. But the very moment he hung up, a wave of unease crept up. Alice usually always keeps important things in her bag and never loses them at random. What's more, when traveling on business, she's always extra alert. Why was it so careless this time? I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the screen of my phone as a series of questions came to mind. Her voice on the phone was urgent and seemed full of tension, but in retrospect, something didn't feel right. She obviously just said her wallet was stolen, but how could something like that upset her so much? Certain tiny details of life began to replay in my mind, as if they were beginning to piece together some kind of unnoticed picture. I tried to dispel these doubts, telling myself not to think about it. Alice has been a trustworthy wife, and we have had no problems in our marriage. After a few days, peace returned to the house. The kids were busy with school, and I continued to handle my work. However, the memory of that phone call still haunts me. I always feel like something is being overlooked, some kind of detail is being glossed over. So, I decided to organize the bills and paperwork around the house and maybe distract myself. It was while rummaging through my insurance policy that I accidentally found a statement that didn't belong to me. Shown above is Alice's investment account, which shows the flow of money each month at a glance. Alice inherited a sizable estate from the death of her parents, which she managed separately, and I always respected her privacy. We trust each other and have no need to ask about each other's finances. But this time, my heart sank as my eyes swept over a transaction entry on that piece of paper. That's a $3,000 expense, and the payment was surprisingly made to a local jewelry store. My hand stopped on the bill, and an inexplicable doubt rose in my mind. When did she ever buy such expensive jewelry? We hadn't had any special celebratory days lately, and she had never mentioned buying any expensive jewelry. More importantly, why hide this? I stared at the line of records, my mind filled with confusion. A jewelry store? $3,000? This information swirled around in my mind, as if a dense fog was enveloping me. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was probably just a misunderstanding. But the uneasy feeling lingered. Out of curiosity, I decided to take further action. I looked up the address of the jewelry store on the bill and dialed the number. The call was answered by a sweet-voiced female clerk. "Hello, how may I help you?" Her voice was soft and welcoming. "Hello, I'd like to inquire about a purchase record. A few days ago, my wife spent $3,000 at your store, and I'd like to know the specifics of that transaction." I tried to keep my voice as calm as possible, but inside I was already getting nervous. "Oh yes, I remember the lady," the clerk replied after looking through the records. "She purchased a new pair of rings." "A ring?" I froze, my heart pounding. What kind of ring did she get? She told us that her wedding and engagement rings had been stolen out of town and that she urgently needed to purchase a new pair of replacements. The store clerk explained. "Wedding ring? Stolen?" My hand shook slightly as I gripped the phone. She never told me she lost her ring and only mentioned her purse being stolen. She hid something so important from me. "Well, thanks for the information." I forced down the waves inside me and hung up. The room was suddenly awfully quiet, as if the air had grown heavy. I stood still, a million questions flashing through my mind. Why would she keep this from me? The loss of the wedding ring was supposed to be one of the most important things to us as a couple, so why did she never mention it? What's even stranger is that she only mentioned the loss of her wallet on the phone and never mentioned the ring. Is this a coincidence? Or is she deliberately hiding something? A sense of skepticism like no other quickly took hold of me. I closed my eyes and tried to recall her behavior over the past few months. She's been traveling a lot lately, and every time she comes back she looks exhausted and occasionally in a trance. She would sometimes suddenly fall into a deep meditation, with a strange emotion in her eyes that I had never seen before. A horrible thought began to grow in my mind. Is she seeing someone else? Had she betrayed our marriage? I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself down. It could all just be that I'm overthinking things. Alice has always been a good wife and our marriage seems to be perfect, but those subtle cracks seem to be slowly showing. There was a time when I thought every one of her trips was a necessary part of her work schedule, but now things have become less so. Recalling her unusual business trips, her hurried schedule, and the $3,000 jewelry purchase, these clues pieced together a disturbing picture in my mind. My heart began to race and my thoughts became jumbled. I couldn't ignore the signs any longer, and I needed to get to the bottom of it. Since discovering the record of that jewelry purchase, I have never been more at peace. Whether it's at work or in moments with my kids, that doubt and anxiety always hangs over me like a cloud. I didn't want my kids to notice anything different, especially with the outward harmony of our family, and I tried to maintain a normal pace of life, but my insides had long been torn apart by suspicion. I know that one $3,000 jewelry expense alone doesn't prove anything, so maybe it's just me overthinking it. However, the content of the phone call from the jewelry store still echoed in my ears: the loss of the ring, the details she had never mentioned, as if they were silently accusing some untold secrets. I began to turn my attention to her business trip itinerary. Alice travels a few times a month, and each time she unpacks and brings her briefcase home a few days in advance. I used to not think there was anything wrong with this, but now everything seems out of the ordinary. I was no longer the husband who believed there was a rational explanation for everything. I needed the truth, no matter how brutal it was. A few days later, Alice was once again preparing for a business trip, this time to a city she frequented. Knowing that this was my chance to learn the truth, I decided to take further action. That morning, Alice was in the kitchen preparing breakfast as usual, looking as if nothing had happened. She was wearing a light blue shirt, smiling, and looked like business as usual. However, my heart is full of questions. I even began to wonder if the woman in front of me, who lived with me every day, was still the person I once loved. "When are you leaving?" I asked, pretending not to mean it, trying to keep my composure. "Flight's at 3 o'clock this afternoon. It'll be in the evening," she replied casually as she poured her coffee, not looking particularly nervous. "Is it a tight schedule? Do you need me to help you pack?" I asked, pretending to be concerned, but in fact I already had a plan inside. "No, it's almost ready." She smiled, looking relieved. I nodded, mentally mulling over my plans for after she left. Alice usually takes her briefcase home and checks it again before she heads out. I decided to use the time before she left to secretly check her briefcase. As much as it disturbed me, I had to make sure she wasn't hiding any secrets. At noon that day, Alice set her briefcase down on the living room couch, ready to finish the final touches. As she went upstairs to unpack, my heart raced and I seized the brief opportunity to walk toward her briefcase. I carefully opened the zipper and flicked my fingers through the papers inside. At first, it was just some work papers, presentations, and meeting materials, and I was so relieved that I mentally even began to chide myself for not being too paranoid. However, as my hand touched a small pouch on the inside of my briefcase, a sense of foreboding came over me once again. I gently unzipped the pouch, and there lay a packet of condoms. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. My breathing became rapid and my fingers trembled slightly. Condoms? What does that mean? We never used birth control because I was sterilized long after my second child was born. Why was she carrying this? The answer was self-evident, and my skepticism instantly became some kind of suffocating reality. I stood stiffly, holding the packet of condoms as my mind went blank. The anger and disappointment in my heart were so intertwined that it seemed to tear my sanity apart. At this moment, I realized that not only was she hiding something, but she may have betrayed our marriage. I closed the briefcase and tried to restore it to its original form as best I could, the anger and pain inside almost taking my breath away. I had to calm down. I couldn't let her pick up on my emotions. I knew deep down that if I questioned her out of hand, she would have an excuse to cover it up. But now, I can't take her word for it anymore. I need more conclusive evidence. I decided to take further action, get a private investigator to look into her every move. Although it made me uneasy, I had no choice. I couldn't be kept in the dark any longer. I started looking for a local private investigator immediately after the kids left for school that afternoon. I contacted several detective agencies through the internet and by phone and finally selected a reputable one with nationwide branches. I explained my situation to them, emphasizing in particular my suspicion that my wife was cheating on me, and provided details and photos of her business trips. We'll send someone to monitor her whereabouts in the city where she's traveling, so don't worry. If there's anything out of the ordinary, we'll let you know as soon as possible. The detective on the other side sounded professional and gave me some confidence. After hanging up, I let out a long sigh, feeling as if a part of the weight of my heart had been lifted. The next thing I could do was wait and wait for the truth to surface. The days following Alice's business trip seemed to overshadow my life. Every time I see a message or call from her, I feel incredibly conflicted. Her tone was as usual, concerned about what was going on at home and even asked if everything was okay with me and the kids. I responded to her as if nothing had happened, but inside I couldn't shake that constant tension. A few days later, the detective agency sent their preliminary findings. We have discovered that your wife has been in contact with an unknown man on several occasions since arriving at her destination and has been in and out of a number of secluded places together. The detective on the other end of the line whispered, as if informing me of some unbearable judgment. When I heard those words, it was as if my heart was gripped hard. Although I was prepared for it, the tearing pain of actually facing it all was still unbearable. Alice, she really betrayed me. The detective then sent a couple of photos, and I could hardly believe my eyes as I looked at the images on the screen. Alice, in the photo, is seen leaning close to an unknown man as the two walk together in an intimate manner. What chills me the most is that the wedding ring on her hand that was supposed to symbolize our marriage is long gone. The scene in the photo breaks my heart. I gripped my cell phone tightly, the anger inside me almost making me lose my mind. This evidence confirmed for me irrefutably her infidelity. I stared at the picture and felt every nerve in my body quiver. I had to make a decision without further hesitation. I can't continue to struggle in a marriage that has been betrayed. Alice has chosen another man, and I can no longer live with her. That night, the children had gone to bed and the house was quiet. The bedside light was dim, and I sat alone on the edge of the bed, my cell phone screen glowing faintly. A picture of Alice and the man was stored on her phone. The way she was snuggling with him seemed like a knife, and with every glance, the pain in her heart grew deeper. It was as if all that sweetness that once belonged to our marriage had been torn to shreds in an instant. That belongs to my wife, that belongs to our marriage, and it's being shared by another man. I can't stand the shame any longer. Her betrayal of me was not just an emotional departure, but a complete denial of the last 11 years of our marriage. All those times we had together are now meaningless. Anger, disappointment, and the desire for revenge were intertwined within me, and there was no getting away from it. I had to do something, not just end the marriage. I had to make her pay for her betrayal, completely destroy her dignity. The next day, I contacted my attorney early in the morning and briefly described my plan to him. I need more than a simple divorce document. I need to make Alice look bad in front of everyone. I asked for the papers to be served publicly while she was at work, and not just served, but I had to let her coworkers know about her cheating. The attorney, an experienced man, heard my request and calmly stated that this could be arranged. After we discussed some of the legal details, he came up with a more radical plan. Not only public service of divorce papers at the company, but also using the media or other public channels to expand the reach. We could use the rumors spreading around the company to make her a topic of conversation throughout the office. The lawyer suggested. I nodded in agreement. Alice has a good reputation in the company. She has always played a professional and decent role in front of her coworkers, and now I'm going to let everyone know the truth behind her. Next, I contacted private investigators and asked them to continue to follow Alice and obtain more intimate photos of her with the man. In order to maximize the humiliation, I needed more hard evidence to make sure she had no defense. The detective quickly agreed and promised to complete the investigation within a few days. A few days later, the detective passed along the latest photos, which not only documented her intimate interactions with the man, but also included images of her having flirtatious encounters with other men on several different occasions. I looked through the photos one by one, as if each one was a hard blow to the trust one had once placed in them. I couldn't bear such a betrayal, and I decided to make this evidence public. The plan is on schedule. It was a normal working day and Alice went to the office as usual. Around 10 a.m., my attorney arranged everything and the divorce papers were delivered directly to the front desk of her business. She was busy with paperwork when she was suddenly notified that there was a document she needed to sign in person. She didn't mind too much. After all, it wasn't uncommon to see things like this in her day-to-day work. She walked to the front desk, signed her name, and then casually opened the paper back. The divorce papers were there, with the familiar name, the lawyer's signature, and the words, marital breakdown due to extramarital affair. Her fingers trembled slightly, her heartbeat suddenly sped up, and her face turned white in an instant. The coworkers around her noticed the difference and cast curious glances at her. One person even tentatively asked, "Alice, are you okay?" She didn't respond, just stood there in a daze, as if the whole world was crumbling under her feet. This is far from over. Just as she received the document, another anonymous email was received on the company's intranet mailbox, one that I had prepared in advance, with those photos of her being intimate with another man attached. The photos were sent anonymously to all her key colleagues and leaders in the company. This is the hidden truth behind your esteemed Alice. The email begins, "A seemingly perfect wife who actually betrayed her family and husband." The company's email system was abuzz with news spreading rapidly like a virus through the offices. Colleagues have opened their emails to see the shocking photos. Those coworkers, leaders, and even her friends who were usually on good terms with her began to whisper, "Is it true that this is happening to Alice?" People whispered in the conference room, in the pantry, and all eyes began to grow complicated. Her image instantly collapsed, and the woman who was once considered to be a dedicated worker, with a happy life, was now a joke in their eyes for being unfaithful and betraying her marriage. This storm of public opinion swept through the company in a matter of hours. Wherever she went, she felt the stares of people, and her every step seemed extra heavy. Whenever she tried to talk to someone, she would find embarrassment and detachment in their eyes. Those co-workers who had once surrounded her were now beginning to alienate her and avoid her gaze. Her supervisor, in particular, was immediately shocked and outraged upon receiving the email. He immediately called Alice into his office and asked her what had happened. She tries to argue, tries to explain that she's been wrongly accused, but those pictures are real, and there's no way for her to argue with them. "You should know that our company attaches great importance to the image and reputation of our employees," the supervisor said seriously. "Now the whole company is discussing this matter, which has a great impact on the company's reputation." Alice's eyes became flustered, and her voice began to tremble. "This is just..." Something in my private life. It shouldn't affect my work." The supervisor shook his head, clearly not satisfied with her explanation. "This matter is beyond the realm of personal life, Alice. I suggest you go home for a few days and calm down." This is the first time she has been asked to take a leave of absence. Once she was one of the most capable employees in the company, and now her career is facing a huge crisis. This public shaming didn't just spread around the company. I orchestrated a larger social circle storm. I sent those pictures of her cheating along with a detailed explanatory letter to her closest friends and family. I know that they will be shocked by this and have a hard time accepting that Alice would do such a thing. Her friend Sarah was the first person to contact me. Her tone was filled with confusion and guilt. "John, I got those pictures. I can't believe it. Would Alice really do this?" "I don't want to believe it either." I responded coldly, "But that's how she betrayed me." Sarah was silent for a moment, as if still digesting the harsh reality. Eventually she sighed and said, "I don't really know what to do with her anymore." Shortly afterward, Alice's family learned of the incident. Her mother called me with a noticeable catch in her voice. "John, what happened? We heard about Alice. We never thought she would do something like this." "I didn't expect it either, but she chose this path for herself." I replied calmly, as if these things had nothing to do with me. This social storm quickly spread through our mutual circle of friends. Those friends we used to get together with for dinners and vacations are now starting to turn their backs on Alice. She became the talk of the town, the subject of everyone's backbiting. Alice finally returned home a few days later, exhaustion and frustration written all over her face. As soon as she entered, she saw the divorce papers. It had been brought back in a hurry while she was at the office, but she had never had the courage to open them. "John, can we talk?" Her voice was low, almost pleading. "Talk about what?" I responded coldly, anger still burning in my heart. She sat on the sofa, her head lowered, looking incredibly vulnerable. "I know I made a mistake, but I really didn't expect things to go this far." "You didn't think of that?" I let out a mocking laugh. "You thought you could continue to hide it from me and the baby and sleep with other men behind my back?" Tears began to well up in her eyes as she sobbed. I don't know how it happened. I never wanted to ruin our marriage." "But you've ruined it, Alice," I interrupted. "Our marriage ended the moment you decided to betray it." She was silent for a moment and looked up with a pleading look in her eyes. "I know. I'm willing to accept a divorce, but please don't deprive me of the right to see my children." There was a dull ache in my heart when I heard those words. After all, she was the mother of my children anyway. But the thought of her betrayal, the thought of her behavior on the outside, my anger burned again. "You don't deserve to remain their mother." My voice was low but firm. "Have you ever thought about the kids waiting at home for you to come back when you're out there hanging out with another man? You're no longer the one who can take care of them." She shook her head in agony. "John, please. I'm willing to make any amends, but don't make me lose my children. I know what I did was wrong, and I'm willing to change, and I will." I interrupted her. "Change? Alice, you don't understand the magnitude of the problem. You've not only betrayed me, you've betrayed this family and our children. Do you think an apology can make up for all this?" Alice lowered her head, tears slipping silently down her face. She didn't defend herself anymore because she knew that what she had done was irreparable. I looked at her, a wave of complex emotions weaving through my mind. I stood up, walked towards the window, and looked out. The night sky outside the window looked dark and heavy, as if foreshadowing our future. I took a deep breath, adjusted my emotions, and then calmly said, "Alice, we're going to get divorced. It's inevitable. However, I won't easily let you walk away from this marriage in one piece. I've already contacted an attorney and will settle everything in court, including child custody." Alice was clearly shocked by these words. Her tears welled up and her voice trembled. "You can't do this, John. I can't lose the baby." "See you in court then," I said coldly and turned to leave the room. A few days later, our divorce proceedings officially started. In the courtroom, lawyers from both sides fought tooth and nail for custody of the children. Despite Alice's attorney's attempts to get her more visitation time, The photos, evidence of her infidelity, and especially her inappropriate behavior during her frequent business trips, made the judge question her motherhood. Ultimately, the court ruled that primary custody of the children would go to me, and that Alice could visit the children at certain times, but she could no longer be with them at all times as she had been. When the judge announced the verdict, I saw Alice's face instantly turn pale. She didn't yell. She just sat in place and seemed to lose all her strength. Her eyes were filled with despair and pain, all of which she had caused herself. After court, Alice never tried to contact me again. I knew that she had realized what she had lost and could never get it back. The marriage, the children, the dignity she once had are now a past she can no longer touch. Even though my revenge plan worked, and I eventually got custody of my children and disgraced Alice in her corporate and social circles, I was still filled with an emptiness. All that anger and hatred, while they served their purpose, they didn't give me true relief. The house is still silent at night, but that cozy feeling that once belonged to a family is gone. Even though I had custody of my children, I realized that this revenge ended up hurting me as well. I lost the woman I had loved so much, the good times we had shared, the family that was intact. Revenge is over, but the pain in his heart still lingers. The night after the divorce was finalized, the house was silent. I sat on the couch, a warm cup of coffee in my hand, looking through the window into the dark night sky. Revenge is over, and Alice has been completely removed from my life. She lost custody of her children and respect in the company. My plan had worked, and her betrayal paid the price it deserved. I have no regrets and no angst. Her cheating destroyed our marriage and betrayed me and our family. It was clear to me that she was to blame for all of this. I just showed her for what she really is and let her suffer the consequences. A few weeks later, news came through about Alice's new life. She moved out of the home we used to share and started renting an apartment on her own. Her job is on the line at the company. Her coworkers no longer trust her, and her reputation has been completely destroyed by her actions. A former friend told me that Alice was seeing different men with seemingly no remorse. I was not the least bit shocked to hear this. Her life has turned into a mess of her own making, and I take comfort in that. She was no longer someone I needed to worry about, and her fall made me even more sure that I had made the right decision. How is she doing? My friend asked me, trying to catch a hint of emotion in my expression. I responded tersely, her life is no longer my concern. My life must go on, and my first priority is my children. Although they still occasionally bring up their mother, I always try to remain calm in my responses and tell them that their mother will come to see them during visiting hours. I didn't let hate get in the way of their lives, and I know it wasn't their fault this marriage failed. A few months later, I decided to take the kids and move to a new place, away from the old house that was filled with Alice's shadow. The new home is located in a quiet neighborhood where there are no memories of Alice. Whenever I see my children running and playing on the patio, I feel a moment of peace in my heart. There is no betrayal here, only new beginnings. After the move, my life gradually returned to normal. I began to focus on work and raising my children, and the anger and pain I once felt dissipated. Though the memories of that marriage still surface in my mind occasionally, they can no longer shake my heart. One weekend afternoon, I took the kids for a walk in a neighborhood park and unexpectedly ran into an old friend, Lily. She has also just gone through a failed marriage, and her husband's betrayal has left her to raise her children alone. We talked a lot about marriage, betrayal, and how to rebuild a life after a broken one. Her resilience and calmness was comforting to me, like seeing a mirror of myself. Over time, Lily and I grew closer, and her company gave me a new sense of hope. Although the scars of the past remain, I realize that life doesn't stop there. My revenge is over. I've regained control of my destiny. I no longer feel pain over Alice's betrayal, and I don't regret the decision I made. Her fall was only her own choice and my life, which had gone in a new direction. One weekend a year later, sunshine flooded the patio of the new home, and the sound of laughter echoed through the air as the children chased each other around the lawn. I stood and looked at them and felt a sense of satisfaction that had been missing for a long time. All of this is a result of my choices, a clean, betrayal-free world. Alice's betrayal made me realize that some things in life can't be undone, and I don't need to be undone. Her choices led her to where she is, and my decisions led us down different paths. I have no regrets, no reflections, and no looking back. I know that I made the right choice. A new life is unfolding, and the past is no longer a burden to me. I found strength in this painful experience, and now I can finally face the future with an open mind. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.